The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. What matter where, if I be still the same, and what I should be all but less than he, whom thunder hath made greater, here at least we shall be free. The Almighty hath not built here for his envy, will not drive us hence. Here we may reign secure. And in my choice, to reign is worth ambition, though in hell. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Oh, I'm feeling pretty prideful now. Satanically so. Did I read it well? Did you notice how well I read it? Did you notice how like I emphasized the right words and to perform it? I could be Lucifer. Everybody wants to be Lucifer, right? Reigning in hell, for goodness sake. Who wants to like serve in heaven? Good grief.
Yeah. So funny enough, I don't think prideful people see it that way. I don't think they say they're going to make a heaven of earth. They're not realizing they're just describing what Milton already described hundreds of years ago.
Well, everybody knows that Satan's the hero. Well, maybe the good guy. No, that doesn't work. The sexy villain. Right? I mean, it's like we're living in. Already we're off on another tangent, and my slides are in the wrong order and stuff. We should have had nothing but Tim Curry as Satan. For the opening here, right? It's like
legend. Oh yeah.
Yes, or Frankenfurter or something like that. It's like the darkness is what everybody's longing for, right?
Yes, it's Jerry Dandridge in Fright Night.
Who's that? What's that?
That was a movie. It was a vampire movie, and he was like just the sexiest vampire alive, and probably always will be.
Well, I clearly. So yes, and now we can think of all the vampire movies. So Tom Cruise is the vampire in the Anne Rice one, right? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, Jerry Dandridge was the character's name. It was what's his name? Sarandon, Chris Sarandon, playing that part.
Oh, the same one who's the count, the seven-fingered count in Princess Bride. Yes. Okay, I can see that. Yes, and so I mean, clearly we are meant to want to have that. Everybody always wants to be like Alan Rickman in Die Hard, right? Who wants to be Bruce Willis? He just is the good guy.
Yeah. The bad guy's fun. He looks like he's having a lot of fun, right? And we always say that about the actors, like, oh, he looks like he had a ball playing that part, right? And everybody wants, if you're acting, you want to play the bad guy because it's more fun, and you like to watch the bad guy when you're in the audience because it's more fun. Why is that? Is it related to pride?
So now I'm thinking we can really keep going on this, right? It's like Heath Ledger is the Joker. Classic, or Joaquin Phoenix as again the Joker.
Joaquin Phoenix is that was absolutely brilliant, and I am looking forward to the sequel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like watching a train wreck. It's like watching a fascinating train wreck, and you just can't turn away because you know disaster has befallen him and will befall everyone around him forever. That is hell. You know, that's you're in hell. But you can't turn away. You can't look away. Why? That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It's a psychological study turned on ourselves, right?
Well, and I mean, with Tim Curry and Frankenfurter, right? The whole point of the movie is by the end he's dead, right?
Yes,
Drowned.
Is killed by his own
killed
pride.
by his own pride, and killed by and you know the mutiny of his servants to resume their own whatever it is. But the thing is, you constantly go back and watch the beginning of the movie where he's at his peak, and it's almost like, oh, everybody just forgets what happens at the end, because what's really great is when he's how do you do?
Right, that entrance.
See, you've met my faithful,
one of the best entrances ever.
Handyman. How can I do that? I can't reach. I can't. The better to rain. But
foot tapping right now.
Done.
Elevator.
Done. We remember all of these entrances. I mean, this is so what I just read is obviously Milton's Paradise Lost, and I had to look it up exactly where it is in the poem, because why would I know, right? It's the bit you always quote. But in my own copy, right? This is the one I had from when I was growing up, and it's in my old handwriting. Satan's rationalization of the fall. I, in my teenage wisdom or somebody's wisdom, wrote, I think that was high school, or I don't know, but see, I got underlined the bits that I just read, so I clearly knew, even when I didn't know anything, that's the good bit.
Yeah, that's the shocking bit, right? Who would want that?
The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell. So I'm in hell here, but I'm reigning, and that's great.
Yeah, it's an extreme version of sour grapes. Didn't want it anyway. I got what I want, right? It's the Aesop's fable. I didn't want heaven anyway. This is better.
I hadn't thought of that. I mean, but the thing is, what he wanted was to reign. So he did get. I mean, he got exactly what he wanted. I mean, it is his choice. Well,
right. He wanted to reign, but he wanted to reign in heaven. But yeah, it's the Satan's a gamma. Right?
Do we know what that is? Do we know? I mean, we maybe our unauthorized audience does, but does our
probably
our outsiders audience, the insiders and the outsiders? Right? You realize we speak from in two directions. We stream into unauthorized, where everybody knows what gammas and sigmas and alphas and bravos and such are, and we stream into Telegram and post videos on YouTube. Please like and subscribe.
Yeah. Nice.
I think the thing is, I'm trying to study. It's like I would like if we actually get enough followers in YouTube, is that reigning in heaven or hell?
That's a good question. Is it limbo?
Well, we're on unauthorized because we've been cast out, except for yet we're still on YouTube, so we're not technically cast. And Razor Fist is in unauthorized, and he's on YouTube too. So is unauthorized.
Correct. And
Chuck Dixon is unauthorized hell, where the prideful have been cast out. Owen and Vox. Stephen Molyneux was pretty heavily canceled too, right? So they've all been cast out into. And they're sitting there in unauthorized, reigning over their own goat world. Wait. Oh no, that's what I just did.
They do.
They're very goatee on it, our guys.
Yeah, they do call him the Dark Lord.
Oh dear. Oh dear. What have we done? We're good girls, aren't we? Aren't we? I was thinking about this when I was putting my makeup on to come on tonight. Is it pride that means that I have to adjust my skin tone so I don't look all flaming red, which is I'm much more pink than I am when I put my pale makeup on.
I don't need pale makeup. I need makeup too. Make me look alive.
Oh, you're already undead. That's what you're saying. Okay, good. We know where we're coming from. Here we are reigning in hell. I don't think we're reigning though, because we're not dark lords. We're ladies.
No.
We're ladies, and
yes.
we are, well, this is week 2 of our Virtues and Vices marathon, which could go on even longer, depending on how much trouble we get into doing this one. But I realized from last week that there are all sorts of terms that need some defining, I think. Heaven and hell clearly being one of them, or one pair. And that is, as it were, critical to even understand. It's like if we are all living in a world in which the character we want to be is Satan fallen. I have a picture. Here he is. Satan fallen. He's this is Dore's, I should embiggen it because this will, it needs to be bigger. Here we go. Make the picture bigger. Here, Satan, he's swooping into you. There's a funny video effect going on as I do this. He's swooping into full focus. There he is in hell, right? And he's all of the other angels that have come with him, because I guess you never just go by yourself. You don't want to like fall all by yourself. You need followers to know who you are. Right?
You need your entourage.
His entourage, right? And that everybody wants to. I mean, I do think E. Michael Jones has been writing his book on American identity, and he starts with this Miltonic passage saying this has been what the Protestant tradition has aimed for centuries now, because Milton was the great Puritan poet, and
well, he's not wrong. Yeah, I mean that's the spirit of rebellion. That's Lucifer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that there's just no way we can get out of it, because it's like we glamorize the rebels. It's like there they are, signing their traitorous document on July 2nd.
Yeah, a lot of well, maybe with the exception of Sam Adams, most people did that reluctantly. I don't think they wanted to do it. Yeah, I think they did it reluctantly and tried not to for years. But there were agitators, Sam Adams being a huge one. There are probably others. I'm undereducated on the era. I'd like to read more about it. But it has developed this reflexive, appreciation for rebellion and appreciation for the underdog, right? Whoever's not in power is automatically not the good guy, but we seem to think he is. So maybe that has something to do with, our psychology of being fascinated by bad guys in literature. I mean, even when we hate them, just people would say, "Oh, you just love to hate him. You love to hate her. It's just so much fun to hate." It's like, what an odd emotion to try to cultivate in your spare time, in your leisure time. But
well, it does mean we have very few stable heroes in our canon right now. I mean, there's always this problem of, I mean, this is so in the context we're talking about is, of course, the subversion of virtue this month.
Yes.
But you take any heroic character, a good character, and he has to have flaws. He has to, I mean, there's a purgatorial character to that. It's like to be fallen, which is human.
Right. It's got, well, it's, they have to have flaws because that makes them relatable. I think it makes it plausible. Otherwise you're talking about the Mary Sue character who has no flaws and who is boring. Nobody likes to watch them. Are we trying to put ourselves in there, or maybe we're hoping to see somebody with flaws that can overcome them? I mean, that's a positive spin on it. That's a possibility.
To become virtuous.
Right, but that doesn't explain why we really like watching bad guys. Why Loki was the most fun character in the Marvel Universe in the movies. We
yes,
loved watching him be mean.
Anyway,
I don't know why.
Well, one, because he's very handsome, right? But I mean, they keep for goodness sake, they keep casting these incredibly handsome men as the villain, right?
How dare they? Yeah.
Over and over and over. Well, and I am, constitutionally incapable of watching Heathers and not liking JD, right? It's like that scene when she walks into the into the lunchroom and sees him sitting there, and it's just like, oh, I'm gonna faint, right? This should not happen. He should not be drawn intensely to these bad guys.
Okay, but let's do Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker, who's really, his performance is inspired. The writing was too, in my opinion. He's not attractive, not in this movie. I mean, he's physically unappealing and mentally scary. And yet we watch him with fascination. We can't look away. Why is that?
Okay, I've heard we need to make like notes here. So I've heard one, Rebels, which is a rebellion against authority.
That's an American character. Which is I'll absolutely agree with that.
Absolutely an American character. Second, Underdog, which I don't think is the same as Rebel.
Not necessarily.
You said Underdog. I mean, these blend together, right. But I think Rebel is different from Underdog. Underdog is, I mean, the Robin Hood stories, which it's the Walter Scott version from Ivanhoe Robin Hood, where he's, the outlaw, right? He's literally outside of the law. So there's a rebellious level there. But the defending the weak outlaw. Okay, so that's the rebel, the outlaw. We're gonna have a taxonomy, like the romance novel baddies, or the romance novel men, right? The alphas. They have to be, what is it? Surgeon. I just remember that one because my dad was.
Oh, okay.
He was. He definitely. My dad was surgeon, pilot. He wasn't a vampire, as far as major in the his dad was a general. He was a major.
Sea captain, right? In the romance novels.
Okay, so my dad's just just like and tall, right? 6'2".
Oh, of course, tall.
A totally bad guy.
Strong.
Ran off with my stepmother and stuff like that. I should just be in revenge mode, but I'm not. Wait, no, I'm not really. Okay, so wait, I've lost my track. See, thinking about alphas, daddies, not daddies. Okay, surgeon. He was a surgeon, billionaire, pirate, vampire, werewolf. No, wait.
Has to be very smart. Has to be very cunning. So
there's a list of 5. Peterson does it with this weird sort of the Peterson does. I saw a video of Jordan Peterson doing it recently. He was talking about, and he was pointing to his fingers this way, which I thought was really strange. It's like, who put your palm out to do that? It's this way.
He did this?
He did this. It was very strange.
That's so weird. Okay, anyway.
Anyway, I don't think he fits in the categories.
I would have noticed that too. That's funny. Anyway, go on.
Well, okay, but it's these category. I mean, think about like Georgette Heyer romance novels. It's the Highwayman, it's the Zorro, right? The aristocrat that is, behaving as outlaw in order to. That's a sort of
Scarlet Pimpernel.
Right.
Right. Zorro, and the Scarlet Pimpernel, and maybe the Count of Monte Cristo.
His is a revenge story.
Revenge and redemption.
Yeah.
Maybe you're right. That one's maybe.
Okay, so we have Rebel, which is one character type. Underdog, outlaw. Outlaw and Rebel are similar, but I don't think they're identical. Because the thing is, the outlaw, like the Robin Hood outlaw, in Ivanhoe, the premise is he and his merry men are actually more England and live according to a truer law than the one that King John is, or Prince John, because Richard's still alive, that Prince John and the sheriff are disrupting. So there's the irony of the outlaw who is in fact more law-abiding than the tyrant.
Was he more?
Okay. And there was another one that you came up with that we were just talking about. What were we just talking about?
Well, you talked about the underdog before.
Yeah.
I mean, the Count of Monte Cristo kind of fits that. It's somebody who is fighting an authority he doesn't have.
Right.
or he's fighting a superior talent, right? Or a superior intellect.
Okay, that's more the underdog of someone who, it's like the Karate Kid kind of thing, right? That he starts off weak and gains ability and is no longer the underdog by beating the lead bully.
Yeah. He still kind of was the underdog until he came out of the ring, until he won. The whole time he was going in, because he was right. He was against a superior enemy, right?
Right.
because they were organized, and they were organized specifically against him. But yeah, that's so underdog and rebel are different. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but often are.
Well, the thing is, I think we blend these, right? And so there's the problem of authority as such, which is the rebellion, right? It's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. So that desire of, and I mean, that fits with what happened with the Declaration of Independence. It's like, we will rebel against you, king, because it's better. I mean, they say they're...
It is better, but that wasn't exactly hell, though. They had made a parallel British society here. You know, they had all the raw materials, and they had trading contacts, so they weren't starting with nothing.
Well, according to Milo's ex post right now, you know, the Americans just we still don't measure up.
Oh, I care.
Wait a minute.
Don't make us beat you again.
Well, that, I think, I mean, if we do the historical version of this, the English got distracted and cared more about India than us. I mean, in fact, because there wasn't much here at the time. You can say that we have lots of resources and ability and stuff like that, but in fact, what the British were, they cut their losses fighting the colonists and said, oh, whatever. And the last battle of the American Revolution was a sea battle over India, apparently, right? So I think some of it is we weren't worth it. I mean, in retrospect, it seems silly to make that choice, but at the time, they had a more precious part of their empire that they spent the rest of the 19th century exploiting. In that sense, they weren't wrong. We didn't become much until after that.
Right. It probably explains the drive west to find the Northwest Passage.
Yeah, the United States still had a lot of scrubbling to do after the Revolutionary War.
Right, but they definitely weren't starting with nothing. They had cities and buildings, and they had lots of land and lots of products to sell that people wanted. Okay,
this is taking us off topic, even though I want to go there.
Sorry,
but
a history professor and a history nerd, we will easily get off topic.
Oh, now you know my weakness. You'll just dangle a historical fact in front of me, and I'm like, whoo! I'll never come back. Anyway, we have, I think, definitely established that there is a longing for these apparently not virtuous bad guys in our culture, which is interesting.
And it predates this country. Where you brought up the Robin Hood, right? The example, that admiration for rebelliousness and being outside of the law changes from the time where Robin Hood's stories become popular to one who was using his outlaw status to help people, to just being an outlaw.
Right.
Kind of the gangster culture, which was not invented by hip hop. It was invented by Mario Puzo in the 1960s.
Right.
When he wrote this great book called The Godfather, and everybody was admiring these people
for being gangsters.
Kind of horrifying. Yeah. Right, for being gangsters, because that projected strength. It projected masculine strength that they wanted to see. Why did they want to see that? It's another question, right?
I was just listening to Tucker Carlson's interview with the president of El Salvador, whose name I don't remember.
Bukele.
And Bukele was talking about how they had to defeat MS-13 in order to like have a functioning country again.
Yeah.
So, but that, I mean, one of the interesting things Bukele mentioned was there was one of these gang members. He said there were 70,000, tiny country. It's like this, population the size of Chicago, sort of, right? Metropolitan area, 6 million or something. And 70,000 people were in these gangs. It's like this whole army of gangs.
It's an army.
Yeah. They're gone, apparently, right? They captured them all. They wiped them out. They shut them down, put them all in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, everybody's sharing that minute because, okay, now I'm really off topic. But anyway, that Tucker is saying, like, how did you do it? And Bukele says, well, you want the official version and the unofficial version. And the official version, he talks about, the way they, built up their own army so that they could make these arrests. Apparently, all the arrests happened in like 3 weeks, right? It was really fast. And
well, you have to surprise them, right? I mean, you're at war,
right? But it was done. And then Carlson says, so, what's the unofficial explanation? Bukele says it was a miracle. Right?
Yes, he's a praying
that they
man.
Prayed and miracle. They've defeated these outlaws, these gangsters, these bad guys who've been murdering people.
They're terrifying, and they're here.
Yes,
in number.
Okay, and that's his point. The MS-13 is spread all around the world, and one of their members was captured recently in Spain and was going to be extradited to El Salvador for trial. And Bukele, he said he tweeted something, and at which point the Spanish all went, no, we can't send him back. He won't get a fair trial.
Sorry, that is so dumb.
Right, but that's our usual response. It's like, I mean, Satan, he's rebelled against God, but God's the authority. And, you can't send Satan back to heaven. He won't get a fair trial.
Yeah. Right. It's I can't explain suicidal behavior on a countrywide level. That seems insane to me.
We're in it. We've actually gotten to the place that we needed to be, which is showing some of the difficulty of people even recognizing pride as a sin. I mean, it's like we valorize the satanic rebellion in all of these different layers. Bukele was funny because he was saying, that Spain, you can keep him. You can feed him. We don't. Fine, keep him.
Go for
don't
it.
Send him back.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah.
We've got plenty of them to deal with, take care of ourselves. And apparently El Salvador has been having, people, other heads of state and such coming from other parts of Latin America, touring their prisons to find out how they're managing them. So, right, this being the setup and the problem of like we in Protestant, I mean, El Salvador is Catholic, right? But we in Protestant North America see Lucifer as justly rebelling against that tyrannical Pope and Pope stand-in God, right? And isn't it we talked about this last week, right? How dare you impose your morality on me? I'm going to reign where I can be.
It's a really good point. How did Milton write that and not see what he was writing?
He was blind,
right? Because he'd have to be blind from birth. I mean,
he was actually blind.
Yeah. I meant spiritually blind, but that's actually, was he born a Catholic and became a Puritan? Where was he?
No, he's in the 17th century. So yeah, that's a good question. Okay. Look him up. He says, Milton was perhaps the last of the great Renaissance humanists in England. This is according to my Airmont Classic back. Humanism can be characterized as an intellectual movement of the Renaissance, which sought to rediscover and revitalize literature of Greece and Rome. No mere antiquarian, Milton delighted in the heritage of the ancient world and did everything he could to make it his own. Almost every line of Milton's verse evidences his wide reading and capacious memory. He is the most learned of English poets. Yet although Milton treasured the pagan literature of the Greeks and Romans, his deepest commitment was to Christianity.
So if this is the first time, I think you mentioned our last stream, we were talking about, I think you were talking about the Renaissance, where people in the Enlightenment completely skipped over pre-Protestant Christianity and went back to the ancient world for their inspirations. And so it sounds like that's what Milton was doing too. He went for his inspiration, he went way back to the ancient world. He was a committed Christian, but he wasn't going to look at Catholic England.
Not going to look at Catholic England.
He's going to go before that because it's okay to like them because they weren't saved yet, right? They weren't baptized yet.
Right.
But these other people who said they were baptized, they were also wicked and horrible and bad. We're just going to pretend they're not there. So we'll have this big gap in our history and gap in our inspirations. Interesting.
Yeah, basically. I mean, again, so Milo's been Xing about this, not tweeting, about the beauty of English, which I do agree on, right? We've done Mosaic Ark episodes on the flexibility and beauty of English as a language, including, as some of the commenters on X are pointing out, it's like anybody can learn it. It's like, right. And it's like, it's simple to learn because it's just word order. It's impossible to pronounce, but the vocabulary the vocabulary is really complicated.
I've always heard I've always heard the opposite.
That it's hard to learn.
That for a non-native speaker, it's very difficult to learn.
Well, it's very difficult to master for sure, because one, it's since it's not inflected, you had to depend everything on word order, and I mean, our verbs are inflected, but our pronouns almost not at all, right? And because we have such an enormous vocabulary, it's very, I mean, I guess Chinese, it's hard to learn to write because you have so many different characters for the words. We have so many words.
Yeah. So I guess phonetically would be easier.
Maybe.
Too.
It's hard to learn to pronounce. Yeah. Anyway, this being, Milo's been listing all of these, great writers in English, and it's true. We have many great writers. The problem is, and this I find persistently when I've seen their thing, it's like, what's the great literature we're modeling Draco Alchemicus on? It's like, it's not in English. Because, I mean, maybe Pearl, but the problem is most of the great English literature is written after the Reformation, Shakespeare, and thereon. And so it's all Protestant.
True.
Except for Tolkien, right?
Most
of it's Protestant, and therefore most of it has this vacuum of rebellion embedded in it.
I'm struggling to see how they couldn't see it. Well, I guess if you demonize your opponent, then it's easy enough to do.
Well, they completely demonize your opponent. I'm going to stick on Milo because I'm clearly thinking about him. He has this riff on making fun of the Spanish, and it's like they have no literature, and everyone says Cervantes, and he says that's it, right? But that mode,
that's all we know.
Mary Vagada, apparently her Spanish is very, very beautiful. Her early 17th century Spanish. And yes, we don't know it because the English Protestants are, at war with the Catholics for this whole period of development of English, the English literature. So we're just this rebellion against, rebellion is an ideal, and then the rebellion against most of the tradition. I mean, that's what Tolkien is. I just footnote Tolkien's so great because he actually knew the Middle Ages.
Yeah. And he created what seemed to be an entirely new genre that's inspired lots of people with that knowledge. Wow, what could we have had if people had not eliminated centuries of their history and culture before beginning to write? Would have been a lot.
I mean, what if we still had Our Lady as part of our repertoire? Indeed, right? Okay. So the rebellion, and this is, we get this. I think we're as many layers down as we can go, and not completely lose people. But you're rebelling against God and authority and the government and ideals of tradition, rebelling against other cultures at the time that are still participating in that tradition, and rebelling against many of the premises of I don't know, narrative and purpose. It's like, why can't we talk about the actual incarnation and Mary and the glory of Christ's story if you're within Paradise Lost and you're within Paradise Regained is I've listened to both of them in audiobook form. Paradise Lost is gripping, right? Like the Paradise Lost, the description of the fall is intense as Adam and Eve are making their choice. But Milton was great on that. Paradise Regained, I can't even remember, right? It's like he doesn't have the power of the incarnation and redemption as he does in the fall and the allure of Lucifer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's what we started talking about. Why are we so attracted to the bad guy?
Why are we so attracted to the
Bad guy stories.
Okay, so hello, Silent Draco. Hello, Annie. When was it made to be more fun? The anti-heroes of the 60s. Well, we think it's Milton, and the sort of Protestant rebellion is part of it. Do you really want to see the chubby nerd boys from middle school as your rebels and underdogs? What? Those nerd boys are the script writers. It's wish fulfillment. Oh, well, this is true, right? Okay. So,
okay.
Yes.
That's where you're going with
yeah,
that.
It's like, what? Christian Slater is not chubby. But he's right. It's like the writers of Heathers are the chubby nerd boys, right? And so, okay, so we are, I don't know, I don't think Milton was chubby. But that sort of character problem of, yes, your wish fulfillment of, I'm going to be this bad boy rebel hero. You really don't want to hear what the segue is that I'm going to next.
No.
Oh, look, I have a
Nobody understands
me. I have a website. Oh, there he is meditating. Okay, you guys, we're going to talk about Sigma Game because we're girls. And we know we have no business talking about Sigma Game because we're girls. And we're unlikely to understand anything that the men are saying because we're girls. But you're not here rebels. Anyway. We're rebels. Oh my God. Good. We're rebels, and Eve ate the apple. You're in this situation because of us in the first place. I could rub it in a bit more. Anyway, as it turns out, today's post is on, well, what is it? The title is The Enlightenment of the High Status Man. This is on Vox's Sigma Game Substack. And it's specifically about the ability of the high status man to have high status, right? I sent this to you this morning. Yes, did you read it?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I did.
Okay. What did you?
I read it a couple of times actually.
What did you think about it? It's actually commenting on something that one of the other unauthorized bloggers wrote about.
Right. John.
Uncle John. Exploring the psychology of the high status man. Well, anyway, Uncle John is part of the group of conversation, and saying, something about social status being a recognition of your actual value.
Well, I don't disagree with that. As that particular, his comments and the article, the Substack article itself on Sigma, seem to be talking a lot about self-confidence, not alone, but that self-confidence is related to self-confidence is related to high intelligence, and that if you have high intelligence, that you wouldn't mind talking about it, I guess.
I think it's not just intelligence. It's, I mean, there's.
Well, it was talking about high IQ. Was mentioned a couple of times.
Yeah, but he also talks. I mean, what Vox argues is he talks about it as self-regard, right? And I know that this comes this comes in a context of lots of moments in which Vox has talked about being accused of being arrogant.
Yeah.
And his pushback on that is, I'm not arrogant, I'm just clear about my abilities and my abilities relative to the people that I'm talking to, and therefore what appears to you as arrogance is in fact my not lying to you about what I understand and you don't. And that's where the intelligence level comes in. But in the example that he gives is there are other ways of having, a high self-regard. For example, Achilles knows he's unvanquishable in battle. That's not intelligence, that's military ability. Ulysses knows he is more clever than anyone else. This is all from the Iliad, right? So it's all the Greek model.
I'm thinking of counterpoints as you mentioned,
okay.
as I was when I was reading it, but go ahead.
Well, okay, so Agamemnon knows he's king and knows his rights as king. Ajax knows he is strong. Their high self-regard is mirrored by the regard in which they are held by others. Only the mediocre are modest about their abilities. The tall man knows he is tall. The brilliant man knows he is brilliant. Even the beautiful woman knows she is beautiful. The idea that she is beautiful because she doesn't know she is beautiful is nonsensical pop music retardery, not genuine philosophy. Okay, my footnote on that is it's romance novel fantasies of wallflowers who wish they would have some man turn to them and say, "Oh, you're so beautiful," which is happening in Bridgerton right now as we speak.
Yeah,
right?
I mean that's a trope.
Yeah, but it's a trope because it's being found beautiful when everybody else can see you as beautiful, which is
right.
Okay. So I was triggering you as I was reading. Shall I read and you get triggered?
Yes.
Achilles knows he's unvanquishable in battle.
He's not. Come on. He's got a flaw. That's how he bites it.
Yeah, fair. Ulysses knows he is more clever than anyone else.
Didn't he get captured by Circe?
You are deadly. Agamemnon knows. You're right. She tricks him and all of his men and turns them into pigs and keeps them on her island for 7 years.
Not so clever.
So much for Ulysses.
Yeah.
I mean, he tricks her, but gets away eventually. But it took him 7 years.
I would never say this directly to Vox because you are
saying it directly. We're on his platform. Everything we say, he can hear.
I don't miss his point. I do know this is what Achilles had a very high regard for himself. That was right, and and that's what he's talking about. But
Agamemnon knows he's king and knows his rights as king, and he's like, I
was born into it.
No. Clytemnestra, and is it the whole oh golly, what's her name? His daughter has to avenge him because he gets poisoned by his wife. Sure, these are the best examples. Oh dear.
Yeah. Well, they do have a very high regard for themselves, but isn't that part of their downfall? Part of why they keep getting,
The Greeks do have a word for this.
Tragedy?
Tip of my tongue. Well, part of it. Tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
It's hubris, right?
Hubris.
Yes, which leads to tragedy.
Right. It leads to problems, which leads to being, captured for 7 years and leads to, dying because your mom missed a spot on the back of your heel, dipping into the sticks, and
Clytemnestra.
Right. I don't agree that a lack of humility. I'm going to say this wrong here. I don't agree that if you're smart, you're boastful necessarily. Certainly, some people are. There have been very brilliant minds in history who were mistaken for being a big dumb ox because they were quiet.
Who would that be?
And not boastful. That would be Thomas Aquinas.
Kind of smart.
Right, kind of smart, just a little bit. Right. So, I mean,
and also, so this is a footnote on this. Aquinas has the high status that he does now in modern Catholic thinking because of the 19th century Neo-Thomists, not because he had the super high status in the Middle Ages that everybody imagines.
He had a lot of influence, though, didn't he, in the Middle Ages?
Less than you'd think. Right, it's like he's mixed in. I mean, Dante mixes him in with the others, right? Bonaventure and Hugh of St. Victor and Bernard of Clairvaux and such. But the Scholastics, I mean, we kind of talked about this last week. The Scholastics go way off the rails. If they had actually been like listening to Aquinas, the history of modernity would be totally different. Which is why they had to have Neo-Thomism to bring him back in as the the sort of standard, because right? So this is it's a little bit like Shakespeare. Shakespeare didn't have the status as a playwright until the 18th, 19th centuries. I mean, one, because the English don't have theater for a bit and they tend to forget about it, but they get the Puritans coming along. But also because our illusion of like the classics is a lot of it's invented in the 19th century. Things like reading Dante as like high status. So
Hmm.
yeah, the feeling of like whether these characters had the status that we think they do, then no, it doesn't map directly.
So the 19th century saw people going back and correcting the academic errors of the Puritans, and they were reviving a lot of the scholarship that happened on mainland Europe that the English ignored and pretend wasn't there. That's interesting. I wonder
Yes.
what prompted that. Hmm.
Hmm. Couldn't say. Medievalism. Um, no, actually, I mean, this is the thing. It's like indeed what prompted it. To a certain extent, just okay, God, you did it again. It's uh, frustration with the Enlightenment because the Enlightenment's so bloody sterile, right? And it's
Oh, okay. They were being rebellious
oh
then
yes,
against
and
the
they're called
current thought.
romantics when they do that, which is
Right, we're not. Yeah, we're romantics. We're not rebels. We're just
well,
romantics.
because I mean, like these are the great
Grammar
English
thing to
poets like
say.
Coleridge and Wordsworth, right? That they are rebelling
Yeah.
against the reason of the Enlightenment, and there's a lot of recovery in the 19th century, but also like okay, we just mentioned Ivanhoe.
Yes.
Walter Scott is fantasizing about the Middle Ages in these novels that he's writing. He says so explicitly in this faux intro letter that he writes from the pretend author of Ivanhoe, Lawrence Templeton, to the Reverend Dr. Dry as Dust, who lives in the gatehouse in York in the fiction of the letter. And the
Hmm.
letter, this prefatory letter, is talking about how, how hard or easy it is to recover the traditions of our ancestors. And oh yes, I've mixed up stuff from the
Right.
12th to the 15th century, but never mind, it's all the same. You're just like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh. And then in the 20th century you have, T.H. White doing the same thing. So we are, talking about looking at it through a glass darkly, right? Looking and then even saying, look, Milton, to rediscover and revitalize the literature of Greece and Rome, that we have this high regard for the Iliad and Homer, is another of these phenomena.
Interesting. The 19th century sounds like a place I'd like to visit, not live there, but maybe visit.
It's created
Just because they were reviving all of
they're
these things,
reviving all
right?
these things and also conscious of losing things, because particularly the English in the Industrial Revolution are very conscious of the way in which the countryside people are leaving the countryside, and the cities are growing, and so you have a
Yeah.
whole sort of pastoral fantasizing about the countryside, even as
Yes.
people are being kicked off their properties and subsumed into the factories.
Hmm.
We've
Right.
lost topic
And
now. Anyway,
and well, have we though?
no,
Because these were a bunch of men who were admiring the heroics of the past, right? When they were reviving Greek literature, and
yeah.
hmm, so they wanted a hero. Why is how does that translate into 100 years, 150 years later today?
Mm,
People liking the bad guy.
very good.
Is it just that we degenerated as a culture so much that now we see good as bad and bad as good? Have we gotten that to that
Hmm.
point? We haven't gotten to the point, I think, where we can't recognize good anymore, but we are elevating vice
Yes.
like never before. We've never actually done that before. It's never been elevated. Tolerated, yes, but never elevated. And that's being elevated.
Well, I mean, unless as a Catholic you say the Puritans have been doing, or the Protestants have been doing it all along, because rebellion is like this. Okay, so in the category in the ranking of sins, pride is at the top precisely for this reason, because it's rebellion
Yeah,
against God's
right.
authority.
It's right. It's Pandora's box of vice. Right. Once you embrace pride, all the other sins start getting out there too, and you just embrace those as well, because why not? I mean, it's me we're talking about here. I'm great. I should be able to do this. right? That's pride.
Okay, so I'm still looking at this sigma stack, and I mean, he talks about, the way you have high status is developing. I can do it by deceit. I don't know how you get status by deceit, but I guess ask Satan for help. Material accomplishment, ditto, right? Developing high self-regard. Is that not also part of this equation, right? It's like we're in a difficult situation, because on the one hand we're in a culture that valorizes rebellion.
Yes.
Politically, culturally,
agree.
grammatically.
I'm on the outside. I'm an outside candidate.
Right. Interestingly, we look back. I think what you're saying is like the 19th century. Well, the 19th century has they end up with regard for the classics because they're all like having to read them when they're in school. The public school system for training the civil servants that are going to go take over India. They're all trained in reading Homer and Virgil. So they grow up as boys with these heroic characters in mind. But those characters themselves, I mean, in the classical tradition, are usually, shown to fail, right?
Yes.
They
at least, once.
I mean, it's all the Iliad is all Achilles being pissed off at having his slave girl stolen. The wrath of Achilles, right? It's because Agamemnon's taken his prize. Behaving like a little kid. Me, mine, give me back.
Yeah.
Heroes honor. So, but we want, I mean, I think the appeal of the sigma. Okay, apparently also there's a post this week in The Guardian talking about how silly this whole sigma thing is, which is hilarious because they're like trying to take it down, but it's
no, it's already out there.
Well, they can't, but the obvious, sort of appeal being, we would like heroic characters who behave virtuously, who have confidence and courage and strength and act justly. Oh, wait, now I'm listing the classical virtues, right? Temperance, justice, courage. What is the fourth one? There's 4 of them. Can't remember.
Temperance, justice, courage.
There's always one that you can't remember. Oh, come on. So we go back to the chat, see if anybody can help us.
I'm going back to like 8th grade here.
Okay, faith, hope, and charity. Those are the theological ones. And then the cardinal virtues are the classical Ciceronian virtues. I think they're Ciceronian. Temperance, courage, justice. No, I can't remember what the other one is. Anyway, we want people to behaving virtuously and justly, and yet we seem completely incapable of recognizing the flaws in hubris. And as you said, think that it's virtue signaling to be proud. I'm so proud of, it's like, I'm so proud of my children. I'm so proud of my country. I'm so proud, right? Pride seems to be our defining virtue right now.
Right. And people don't realize that it's actually not a virtue. It's the opposite. It's like, it seems to have happened like without us even knowing it, almost like it snuck in there into our language.
Yeah.
But now that it has snuck in, now you have an entire month dedicated to it, which all Christians, all without fail, 100 years ago saw as vice. So, I mean, and people are rightfully asking, well, what's next? What are we going to be celebrating next? It's a fair question, because if everybody agreed that it was vice 100 years ago, or even 50 years ago, or even 40 years ago, and now it's the exact opposite, what's next? So people are looking for stability, which is why they're looking for strength. Mm-hmm. They're looking for masculine strength and leadership. That's kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
But belligerence is often, an easy mistake for confidence. And so what, with every virtue, there's a corresponding vice, and vice versa, right?
Right,
So
but this is where I think we just start losing people, because like last week we were talking about,
it's confusing.
yes, well, last week we were talking about the seven deadly sins. I'm gonna shrink Satan here because the rest of our slides are a bit bigger than we'll shrink him down to his proper framing in the bounding box. There we go. Okay, Satan, you are bound and tinied, right? That we need to talk a little bit better and more clearly about why in the Christian tradition humility is considered the queen of the virtues, and how this isn't, it's not in fact the same thing as saying the hubris that destroys the heroes like Oedipus in the Greek understanding, because that's just tragedy, right? This is the
Right.
Christian story is a comedy because Christ wins against Satan. And even so far as we are sinful and undeserving and incapable of doing anything to lift ourselves out of any of this, God does for us, right? So there is
Right.
the, it's
And that's the
ultimately
humility.
a joyous story, but it's incredibly difficult now. I mean, given it's like the self-help, industry. I mean, that's some of where it comes from in I mean, literally self-help is the name of a book by Samuel Smiles, which is about from the 1870s, and it's about, yeah,
Oh,
it's about industrial entrepreneurs who, like, the one I know best is one of the, oh, I never is it Farnsworth? One of the iron workers who develops in Manchester. He develops a particular kind of tubular steel, and they make bridges and stuff out of it, and he's one of the great founders of the Iron Age, right? And Smiles writing self-help is that, right? It's this glorification of industry and I guess confidence and status in your ability to make stuff.
I wonder. I need to find out how you look up beginnings of phrases. I think you know how to do this. Did you ever hear the phrase "God helps them who helps themselves"?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's the American mantra right there. It's self-help, and I'm fascinated because I've never heard this before. That that concept was invented in 1870. I would have guessed 1970.
Right. No,
Because
I
yeah,
hear self-help. Smiles. Yeah, Samuel Smiles. Earlier than I thought. Published in 1859.
yeah, that's
Self-Help with
that's
Illustrations of
interesting.
Character and Conduct, a book published in 1859 by Samuel Smiles. The second edition of 1866 added perseverance to the subtitle. It has been called the Bible of mid-Victorian liberalism. And so he has the second edition, Self-Help, National and Individual, Leaders of Industry, Inventors and Producers, Three Great Potters, Palissy, Boetger, Wedgwood, Application and Perseverance, Helps and Opportunities, Scientific Pursuit, Workers and Art, Industry and the Peerage, Energy and Courage, Men of Business, Money, Its Use and Abuse, Self-Culture, Facilities and Difficulties, Examples, Models. That's the section that I have the one story from. Character, The True Gentleman. Self-Help sold 20,000 copies within 1 year of its publication. By the time of Smiles' death in 1904, it had sold over 250,000.
That's incredible.
Translated into Dutch, French, Danish, German, Italian, Russian, Japanese, Arabic, Turkish, and several Indian languages. In the preface to his 1880 book, Duty, Smiles wrote of self-help. In America, the book has been more widely published and read than in Great Britain. And
well, yeah, it fits right in with our character.
Right.
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 Yeah, which is yeah, God helps them who helps themselves. A very Protestant work ethic type of phrase, and it's something. As I was growing up, I accepted unquestioningly, even though I was a Catholic, which is strange. In hindsight, it's just really strange. It's like, well, God helps people who can't help themselves at all, too.
But I'd say no. You're saying
sure
that now.
does.
God helps those who help themselves. That's literally Pelagian. That's a heresy.
Interesting.
Right? It's a very British heresy
Yeah.
too, because Pelagius is apparently, allegedly, I haven't looked this up. There's controversy, right? But he's apparently British, right? From the fourth. Augustine's his great debater,
Mm.
and the problem being, can there be a movement that you make yourself to help yourself? And so the God helps those who helps themselves is straight up Pelagian. It's
Right.
heretical.
And I can see why, because it would lead directly. I don't need God. I can do everything myself. Right.
I think we've found that the core. Well, okay, so some of it last week was with Kant and my morality shouldn't interfere with your morality, right? This idea that you're
Yeah.
atomized and not, it's like, yes, that we don't have any effect on each other, however we behave, which is kind of idiotic. But having no sense of, actually our relationship with each other. Plus this idea that, the self-help, right? Yeah, Smiles invents this as a term, I think. And it becomes, thanks to his book, this mantra of the late 19th century in, entrepreneur. It's literally what we do in entrepreneurship now, right? You should be able to have your own business and help yourself.
It's rugged individualism.
Escape from the tyranny of the system.
You sound like a rebel.
I'm so American. I'm so much
like
more American than
any
of the rest of you.
revolutionary.
I know. We've talked about my pirate ancestry. We were the first self-helpers, privateering for Elizabeth.
Helping yourself to somebody else's property. Perfect.
Indeed. Okay, so it's a stretch, therefore, for all of these reasons, to consider humility is actually better, I'd say.
Well, if it's constantly reinforced, right? This is bootstrap philosophy.
Yeah.
Right? You got to pick yourself up. And it's a moral good for you to do that. It's a moral good for you to not ask God for things. And this was a very Puritan thing. Yeah, it's a moral good to not waste time. You have to spend time wisely.
Okay, that's different, and don't go there, because that's a corruption of monastic. No, we're not doing Weber today too. You keep pulling me off into these other directions.
I'm sorry.
No,
history nerd. Sorry.
Okay, but no, but I'm enjoying this because we are actually unpacking the problem better than I think we did last week.
Yeah.
And the single most important thing that the English lose from their tradition in the 16th century is, of course, the monasteries, which is the one place where humility was actually understood. and it's a monastic virtue, and we did talk about how the desert fathers go into the desert to fight the demons, and that they get stronger fighting the demons and so forth, and that therefore the imagery that we have of the battle of the virtues and vices comes very much out of this monastic practice. But the sense of, like, what is the what is the purpose of life? What is actually, that's kind of straight up it. What's the purpose of life? And that our goals in this life are Satan's, right? Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. It's like better to be powerful. What would Vox say in his stack, right? You can cheat, have material accomplishment, develop high self-regard, right? All of that from within a completely earthly frame. Of course that's what you want, right? You want to reign.
Or at least over your own life, right?
Be in control of your own life, be in control of your own status.
Right.
Let's compare this with what the monastic tradition was actually designed to support, which if you're following along, everyone, and you look in our newsletter, we've given links for some of these things, and one of them is the Rule of St. Benedict, which you need to know to understand a lot of what's going on in this tradition. But to understand what the purpose of the monastic life was actually, and therefore what counts as virtue within that context. And I think sort of neutrally stepping back, virtue as a term simply means strength. I'm still not sure what the cardinal virtues are. I'm going to look them up now that I'm playing with my... Why can't I remember what they are? Prudence! I can't remember that one. Wait. Prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Prudence, I lost prudence, right? Courage can be fortitude. So prudence, justice, courage, and temperance. Prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Okay. What virtues are strengths of the soul. And what vices are, they're faults of the soul, they're weaknesses, right? So if we're going to worry about what is a virtue, it needs to be a virtue for a particular purpose, right? It's like saying, what is a strength? What kind of strength are you going to need in your soul to accomplish what?
Right, communication with God in heaven.
Well, that's for the monks.
That's what it's supposed to lead to.
But no, the thing is,
they're the example for everyone,
but
though.
Virtue has an ancient element too. And again, I said in the newsletter, everyone check the newsletter from last week. I got links to my various courses, and one of them was one on the virtues and vices, which was more in the monastic tradition, which we're about to try to introduce. But another one was the How to Be Good course, which was from other, like from Confucian, the Confucian Analects, Plato and Aristotle, the Old Testament, New Testament, Talmud, Thomas Aquinas, and those all have different frames of purpose, right? Aristotle doesn't care about getting to heaven at all. No heaven. There isn't such a thing. Plato, not so sure, but I mean, Aristotle, although what's interesting for him, virtue is about preparing for contemplation, but contemplation is this sort of philosophical goal of like leisured reflection and meaning, right? But it has nothing to do with getting to heaven. Aristotle's virtues cannot get you to heaven because that's not their point.
So what prompted him to write about virtue? Was it something he had observed in his own society? I mean, what was the purpose even of discussing virtue?
It's the meaning of life, right? So it's like, what is the meaning of life? And for Aristotle, in the slave society that he's describing, it's to be free, not enslaved. You remember he has a whole discussion, I can't remember exactly where, because I went off topic again, but this isn't your fault. This is actually working.
Okay, not this time.
No, none of it is actually all my realizing what we need to establish in order to talk about any of it. And I think we're doing it well, right? Because it's in America, it's very hard not to see the virtue of self-help, right? That for us is a primary
it's impossible
virtue, because our goal is
impossible.
create businesses and entrepreneurship and such. So of course your self-help, of course self-regard and ability to start your own business is going to be counted as the greatest virtue.
Or even own your own home, right?
Right.
And have your own land and grow your own food. And all these things, all these are industrious things. They're things you do.
Right.
That and the Americans very much wanted the freedom to do what they wanted. Or somebody said recently, it was the freedom to do what you ought to do was what the founders intended, is what I've heard. But they all mostly agreed on what you ought to do. Mostly, I think 2/3 of the signers were actually Christian. But,
okay, so you're right there, but just realize what just happened. We just went off again into the wilderness of what's ought, right? What ought you to
do?
Yeah,
right.
And this I'd say this is why I think this problem is really worth our time unpacking over endless streams, because We may or may not get to the slides you put together for this week, but that's okay. We'll use them
Aw.
next week. It's still Pride Month. Right? We're going to spend all month on Pride. We'll get to envy and the rest of them
Jesus
later.
Month, as I know it.
What?
The Sacred Heart of Jesus Month. That's
we're gonna have to do 2 streams a week. We're gonna have to like have dueling streams of what? Anyway, what was I thinking? Pride, no. Self-help. Oh, Christian nationalism. Nobody even knows what that means, right?
The problem is that everybody knows what that means, but they all have a different definition of it.
Okay, they all have their own definition of it, right? And
they have to, unless they're all the same religion. They would have to.
But they all constantly quote that thing of Adams, like the Constitution is only written for a Christian, virtuous people. It's like, define virtue. That's
great. Adams was a Puritan. You all can convert, and then you can quote him, right? I don't think you want to. I don't want to.
No, but this is the problem. Within, for example, Aristotle's, and I'd have to look up Aristotle. Maybe we should do Aristotle. That's whole nother. Aristotle has this famous way of thinking about virtue as a moderation between 2 poles, right? So starving yourself and gluttony, and the virtue is in eating the right amount, right? So there's that, right? It's utter self-abasement, cringeworthy, humility versus arrogant, overweening confidence, and the moderating one would be self-confidence or something like that, right? So it's everything that Aristotle sets up are the mean, right? If you have an idea that virtue is a mean, that's coming from Aristotle. But the context in which he's imagining all this, it's the ancient city, it's the polis. The polis is constituted by the male citizens. Women aren't citizens. And the goal in his imagination of being virtuous, it's a little bit more like the Confucian gentleman, because it's a model of behavior for men in a particular social situation.
Okay. Social grace. He's teaching how to act and within your station.
Yeah, somewhat.
For the betterment of the society you live in.
Well, yes, I guess so, because he wants them to be, to enjoy the status of citizens of the polis, and the highest, the highest thing that you can achieve as a citizen of the polis is contemplation, but in a Christian context, that's going to be, mystical ascent to the divine, ideally. But that's not what Aristotle means. I mean, there is a kind of feeling of, you can move into the metaphysics and contemplate, reality and such, but it's not salvific.
Yeah, it sounds like nirvana, almost. Like this, you trying to reach a state of equilibrium with the universe as you contemplate it.
Again, nirvana is something else, because your ego dissolves at that point, allegedly, and this doesn't seem to involve that. There's no blending with the reality of things. It's contemplation. It's philosophical in the sense that if so maybe if what Aristotle writes are descriptions of things. I mean, the things that are known in the Middle Ages early on are things like his categories, where he's trying to describe how you make a description, and you have the substance of whatever it is that then accidents are attached to, and the accidents are the things that you use to fully describe something: time, place, quality, stuff like. I should remember what the 10 categories are. One, substance. So he's got that descriptive element, and then his physics describes the physical world. His metaphysics describes the, soul and things like that. And I mean, things like the rhetoric and the politics describe process and system and everything. But there's there may be a feeling of meaning, but it's not sacred in the way that Christianity understands things.
Okay.
So within this context, virtue will not mean the same thing for him as it does for Saint Benedict in the monastery.
well, then they have the same problems we have today. Virtue doesn't mean the same thing to us as it does to the people running the Pride movement.
Right.
So nothing's changed in 4,000 years.
Well, okay, so I guess in the nothing's changed, there's paganism and Christianity. Right.
That little thing has changed, yeah.
We're still there. We did,
right.
John Davidson told us about that a few weeks ago, right? That we are either in a world that sees the world as the purpose, which is the classical ancient world. Although, I mean, it's like, and maybe it's like talking about paganism, and paganism, as we talked about it with Davidson, is desire for control and worship as this service of Satan, but with the hope that he gives you stuff, right? So it's
right.
prizes in this life, power, particularly.
Yeah, that's not what's going on with the elevation of pride as a virtue. And I don't just mean this month. I mean, proud to be an American, like being proud of your community, proud of this, proud of that. It's in our everyday language now. People are, they have, well, I guess I'm just going to repeat myself. They have different definitions of virtue, right? So they have different, I think last week we're asking, and you asked again today, why should you choose humility over pride? It's because people don't understand what pride is.
Right. But because we don't, just checking our stream. Nobody's listening. Where'd you all go?
It's Friday night.
It's Friday night. Now it's like we're trying to about virtue. They're all out there being vicious. But the thing is, people don't get what that means. Okay, so virtue. It was funny when I was teaching the virtues and vices class, and like nobody would like in the scholarship we were reading like just define it, and then it's like it's in the word. It just means strength. Virtus is strength. So virtue is a strength of the soul, but then it's like, okay, so what counts as a strength of the soul depends on the context in which you need strength. And if your strength is to survive, in I mean, you could say it like this, right? If your context is simply to survive in the tone, we're still going to do Bridgerton one day because you have to watch it. And then we'll deal with the the romance novel part of it. If your context is surviving in that society, that with the balls and the banter and the wit and stuff like that, virtues could include quick-witted repartee, right? It could include.
Are those virtues or skills?
Okay, so that's fair, right? So a skill maybe is a more performance specific thing. The virtue would be the capability of your psyche or your soul to perform it, right? So confidence.
Yeah. Okay. I'm stuck with the idea of pride being confused with self-esteem.
Yeah, and I did. So one of the ways to check these things is Google Ngram, where you can look stuff up in words and phrases and stuff. And I did try, but some things are harder to search than others. Like particular words you can search, but proud of, just like I got nonsense, right? Because that's too general a phrase. What I was thinking of is that kind of pride, like patriotic pride, national pride.
Yeah.
That I think is I'm willing to defend its honor. Right. So, and
yeah, I think they're using the word pride for lack of a better word, because otherwise you'd have to use a phrase like I love my country. Love of country is actually a virtue. Right. So when people say they're proud of their country, what they're really saying is I love my country.
Right.
And I love the things my country has done, and I love the things our country is going to do. That's a lot of words. So I think they just kind of shortened it to proud of. Right. Because proud of had a more secular meaning, I think. But I mean, that's out the window because of what's happening this month. Now it has to be discussed.
Well, okay. So
because of that,
the problem is equivocation, which is the one word meaning lots of things.
Right.
I think in this pride sense, it could be, and this is what I'm thinking of, and I'm just guessing that there's the chivalric noble concept of honor, which you will defend,
Mm.
and that it's in the Middle Ages you have actually conflicting systems of virtue, not just the Aristotelian that the scholastics are reading about, but you have warrior culture honor, warrior culture
Mm-hmm.
virtue, which is worrying about your honor, which in their context, like we have some um scholarship talking about the way in uh medieval romances or epics, the it's a prerogative of the nobility to get angry, right? The lower class people don't get
Interesting.
angry. It's the it's the king in his anger, and the nobleman in his anger, right? And they're angry when their honor is impugned, which bleeds over into the
Hmm.
way in which you're describing, like Satan, who is our sort of governing character for this episode. um
Mm-hmm.
he is, I think he's sympathetic in some ways from Milton, because it's tapping into that ideal of aristocrat. I mean, it's like, think about all of our like glamorous villains that we were listing at the beginning. They're handsome,
Yeah.
they have status. I mean,
Right.
actors have status in our actual society because of their ability to perform this stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they seem to have this sort of nobility of character or something like that, which is their anger at being besmirched. There your Count of Monte Cristo character fits, because he's been
True.
insulted.
Right. Right. Honor must be satisfied. Must be satisfied.
Right.
Right. Because if you don't, then if you don't answer the insult, then you deserved the insult eventually.
Precisely. So I think the proud to be such and such is carrying over. It's like we also have these conflicting systems of virtue between what we say. Okay, so the Confucian with the Analects is to be a gentleman, and that is to be fully human. And there's certain responsibilities that the gentleman has to his parents and to his society and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. It's not the same as, and if you think about, China has gone through different periods of Confucianism and anti-Confucianism and neo-Confucianism and stuff. It's not a simple thing like, oh, they're Confucian, right? That's actually quite complicated.
Mm-hmm.
But there are ways in which their expectations have been shaped by Confucius, just like ours have been shaped by the New Testament, that become so natural to people that they don't realize when it was articulated, and how it was
Yeah.
like created culturally as an expectation. And one is
Mm-hmm.
that the ideal of caring for your family, that the Cultural Revolution really disrupted. um that was very
Yes.
hard under the Maoists, to have the children turning
Mm-hmm.
on their parents. It's like the literal opposite of
Oh, it's horrific.
Confucian
It's
honor, or
yeah.
Confucian honesty, I guess.
Right. It was horrific on a natural level, but it was also horrific on a
Hmm.
cultural level for them. It's just probably the worst disaster in their history.
Right. Which you can show how truly diabolical it was in the disruption of
Hmm.
their virtue.
Yes.
So think about that. That's one. And I started with Confucius in my class because I wanted something that was like completely other to the models that we were using, because I didn't want everyone reading the Aristotelian and Old Testament and go, oh yes, that's virtue. It's like, no, you need to feel these as different structures of expectation. So we've talked
Hmm.
about Aristotle now. It's within the polis, it's for the citizens, it's just the freemen, and it's moderation. But that has all of these entailments that are different from Christian virtue. And then within the European context, that warrior nobility, military honor, that gets overlaid with these expectations of monastic virtue, which we still haven't talked about, but we need to. And then there's another layer which has not been mentioned at all, but is implicit in all of this. All right, no, we have actually mentioned it. The bourgeois, which is the townspeople of the Middle Ages that feed into what the Puritans were townspeople from East Anglia, and then the townspeople
right.
who come to the United States. And that a lot of what we have as virtue in modernity is, I mean, Marx was right in this, right? It's bourgeois virtue, which has a totally different character yet again. It's particularly from the aristocratic, also from the peasant. And here I'm playing off somewhat what I learned from Deirdre McCloskey, who did a set of books on bourgeois virtues, although it's a little confusing, and Adam Smith is very confusing, and we won't go, but things like responsibility to your community and democracy as we imagine it now really comes out of these medieval town governments.
The medieval says so it's a bourgeois thing. So the nouveau Marxists in our country and in Europe who are yelling about the bourgeois capitalism and bourgeois democracy, they're not wrong.
It is town culture is actually a real thing, and it's not the same thing as the ancient Greek culture, although they're both in cities, and it has, I mean, things like it's somewhat overlaid with Christian virtues like responsibility for neighbor and such, which the Greeks don't have. They don't care about neighbors. But that Smiles self-help kind of fits in that, this bourgeois responsibility.
Well, I suppose it would. I suppose it would, because they were running their own governments.
Right.
I mean, they still had a king, but they were also running their own government. So eventually this led to, well, what do we need the king for? Right.
Exactly.
Because the king and before that, the king said, well, what do we need the Pope for? Right. And it just kept cascading.
Oh, so we're still back to the satanic, right. Yes, this disruption of authority. So,
yeah.
Yes, so the town, right. Exactly. The town governments in the Middle Ages, the one thing they get that they're really jealous of is privileges from the king, which is exemptions from certain laws. So liberty in that context is very much town liberty, right? You are, and there's a famous phrase like a year and a day. The town air makes free after a year and a day. I can't remember exactly how it's phrased. That if someone ran away from his manorial lord and managed to support himself in the town for a year and a day, he would be counted as free of those previous obligations. Yeah, so
gave him good incentive to hide.
Well, but the thing is, the towns suck population from the countryside, so they use these people, right? All the people,
because they're getting more power to themselves, right? More economic power.
Yes, it's
too.
like it's a little bit like our immigration now, but they needed to bring in population. Cities always take population from the countryside. They're not very fertile places. They depend on the countryside to populate them.
Even back then, huh?
Yeah, they're not natural. They don't naturally multiply. It's a curious feature.
It is. And similar to today, isn't it?
There's so many things that the processes are so similar. Okay. So I think we have half an hour left. We can introduce the monastic virtue, and then that gives us better grounding for understanding how to look at the pride that people are engaging in now. We can dedicate the entire episode next week to doing that. That's good. See,
did we just do a bait and switch? I don't know. We didn't really.
No, well, no,
right?
Because we said it was going to take us a while to unpack all of this, right?
Right, but we're only on the first vice. That is the big one.
Well, all of the other ones will follow along really easily once we figure out what pride is. Okay, so
right,
the major, when the king disrupts with the Pope, what's interesting is he throws off the Pope, but then he seizes all the property of all the monasteries in England, which means that of the many things that the English lose in their modern day culture, the most central is the monastic, which means they lose the entire training and vocabulary for what for centuries had been counted as actually virtues, right? The Christian virtues. So when I don't even know what John Adams is talking about when he means virtue, right? And I think this will fit with one of the things that people never know now. It's like, well, how can you force your morality on me? It's like, well, good question, because nobody gets the frame in which expecting virtue is actually appropriate.
Right. That question leads to anarchy. It leads to complete anarchy, because you can never answer to anybody's satisfaction.
Because nobody, okay, and why they can't answer it to anybody's satisfaction is because of the paganism Christianity thing about what's the point of it all. Like, if we've established that virtue is contextual for what counts as a strength, what's the point? Okay, so right now, and in all of this conversation, we're going to get like 3 slides today, right? That's okay. I am showing the front of Bath Abbey in England. You'll know Bath because the crescent is always in all of the period dramas, including Bridgerton. Although they pretend it's in London, right? But there's the Georgian crescent, right? Well, Bath also has this abbey building, and on the front of the building there are these 2 ladders, right? And one the angels are climbing up, and the other one the angels are falling down. And we say this is like Jacob's ladder, right? He sees the angels climbing, and there's a song to that. We are climbing. Yeah, okay, so you're climbing Jacob's ladder, and the what are the angels doing? Where are they going? Where are they falling from?
I gotta try to remember the story.
Well, where would they go if they're climbing the ladder?
They're going up to heaven, right? But they're bringing things with them, right?
I don't know. You have to look it up.
I think so.
Oh golly, I didn't look that up. Well, he sees he's in a dream, right? And he sees them climbing up and down the ladder.
Yeah.
Right. So in the monastic tradition, one, they think they're going to be angelic. Right? This is a very apt sort of image in the abbey, right? They think they want to live like angels. Okay. So what do you do if you're going to be an angel? What do angels do?
They do good deeds.
What?
if they're good angels.
Well, okay. So angels, what are at this? See, guys, you don't know what Christianity is because you really don't know the full backstory on all of these elements of what we expect in Christianity, right? Fundamental, primary. We're gonna need the whole other course on this. What are angels? I'm not really quizzing Casey. I'm just saying, to set up that you need some grasp on this problem.
I'm an easy mark. It's okay.
Okay, what are angels? They don't just what are angels?
They're messengers.
Okay. To and from heaven.
Literally,
they're literally angels. Angelos is a messenger. Okay. Some of them they're cherubim and seraphim. What are those?
Well, the seraphim guard the throne of God.
They're thrones,
right?
Yes. And the cherubim.
And I can't remember.
So the cherubim, the cherubim are on the ark facing each other, so like the footstool, but they also carry the chariot that Ezekiel sees. They're basically frames for the divine. And I have loads more slides. I didn't figure we were going here. That's okay. The seraphim are the throne, and the cherubim are like the chariot. But one way or the other, they're the thing. You're in heaven with the angels. Angels are in heaven angels.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's interesting with the messengers. It's like if they're going to and from, it's like, do they leave heaven when they bring message? Are they actually still in heaven? Are they here? They're like a fiber optic problem.
The speed of thought, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's an interesting thought. Do they come to us? Do we come to them? We just don't know it.
So, but it means like, where's heaven,
God,
right?
Space and time.
It's like it's filled with angels.
Yeah.
We know that. There's the throne of God there. We know that. And to be angelic, right? So what the monastic life is about is, and the best phrase to keep with this is singing with the angels, right? They basically spend their lives prepping to be able to be an angel. And what you want to be as an angel is part of the choirs of heaven.
If you like singing,
come on, work with me here. This is your desire. This is the one thing you want.
I know. My local priest said the same thing, and you should hear the terrible selections they make. I don't want to sing that for eternity. It's really awful stuff.
Okay, this is another problem if we've, lost the point, right? The angels around the throne sing, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. You haven't heard this full, the best, like, this is what the monastic chant is supposed to be. It's supposed to be literally participating in the singing with the angels.
Right, participating in the ultimate worship of God along with them, like fellowship with heaven itself.
Right. So you have to
right.
have that. Actual Christian virtue, you have to kind of want this to start with. Never mind, God helps those who helps themselves. Like, let's be clear about what the point is here.
Right. Help yourself to what is the question?
Well, yeah, and that phrasing, it's to power now, right? It's to control and status, and
right.
Stuff. Wit and social standing and regard, right?
Right. Things you're not really supposed to want for yourself. Things that things that are supposed to be in service to God. Anything that you get is a gift, and the gifts that you give, you're supposed to use for Him and to get to Him and to help other people get to Him too. So yeah, that is this very strange phrase. I mean, even to say prosperity gospel doesn't even quite cut that phrase. I think that phrase is very destructive. I think that now at my age, like I said, I used it growing up without even thinking. Everybody said it.
Well, and we're learning. It's like most of our phrases like this are more recent, unless they come from Shakespeare. But I'm gonna look up. I'm not gonna look that up. But
it's probably don't look it up. But it's probably true.
It could be Shakespeare. No, but it's probably Polonius. If someone says it, it's bad advice. That if we've established that, okay, so for Confucius the goal is harmonious society. For Aristotle, it's contemplation, but only if you're a free citizen. For the bourgeois, it's making money in the town, I guess, and freedom from the king. But in this monastic world, in which you're like really trying to achieve, I mean, it's like, is it a, can you do this, right? Can you actually achieve angelic, choirness? That's a tall, I mean, that's a, talk about pride, right? It's like, oh, I want to be a monk, I'm going to be an angel.
Well, I mean, you're supposed to want to actually be with God. So I can understand the philosophy behind it, right? But it involves not being prideful. On the one hand, you're saying you want to be an angel. How prideful of you! Right?
I want to be. I want to be Satan. Angels, I want to be Lucifer. I want to reign in hell.
Lucifer's an angel.
Yeah. See.
Exactly.
See. We
started. You have to be careful which angel you're talking about.
We started this episode with people wanting to be Lucifer.
They do.
It's like, which angel are you going to be?
As always, this is an onion with lots of layers, right? That you pull back.
Yeah.
And we can't speak for the whole world, so we'll just speak for Americans because we are, and say, our Protestant beginnings of this country had very far-reaching and deeply rooted ideas about self-reliance. And that self-reliance was a godly thing.
Right.
And that's, I think, what leads to America's original sin, which was pride, right? It was Satan's sin. It was pride. It was rebelliousness.
Right.
Were they trying to be like Satan and get lots of stuff? I don't think so. I think that's arguable. I mean, some people were. Like I mentioned Sam Adams. Other people weren't. They very reluctantly said, yeah, we got to do this. And I think George Washington fell into that camp, right? So there's room to argue that. But what's not arguable is that it was a Protestant nation. It was founded as such. There was only one Catholic that signed the Declaration of Independence, and he was a convert. I think he was a convert, either himself or his father. There were recent Catholics.
Okay.
It was very much a Protestant country. And their ideas are still deeply rooted here. And I do think they were based in rebellion, but it wasn't against England. They inherited England's rebellion against the Catholic Church. I think it goes way further back than 1776. Right. That's all I'm going to say on that right now.
Well, no, we've actually achieved, like, reincorporation and point.
I'm trying.
No, but the thing is, we're right. We needed, in order to understand our attraction to pride as a culture, this is what we had to understand. And I do find it ironic that we started with Satan, who's an angel, who's a fallen angel, and we're trying to get to the point where we understand the desire to climb the ladder with the angels to be in heaven. Right? It's like, are you going up the ladder or down the ladder? But one way or the other, the aspiration is to be an angel. It's just to be the fallen angels or to be the angels who are in service to God. Now, this, as far as the rule of Saint Benedict, that what Benedict has a very interesting setup for, like, what the point of the whole thing is. And we said with the Desert Fathers, they go into the desert to train themselves in virtue, right? With the strength of the strength to resist temptation, primarily. Saint Anthony being battled by demons and stuff like that. Their virtue is resisting all of those temptations. Benedict sees that it's actually very hard to do that by yourself, like resisting all those temptations. He has a famous description in the first chapter on the kinds of monks, and he says there's those the first kind of monks are the ones that live in community. The second time are hermits, and they've practiced in community first before they go off into the desert and fight on their own, to the solitary combat, right? But the ones that live in community are the ones he's writing for, and he says this is why they're there, right? Okay, footnote: Benedict seems to be using an older introduction here called the Rule of the Master, but anyway, so he's playing off of this tradition of saying you're now here in community to do something in particular, and this is what it is. Listen to my son, to your master's precepts, and incline the ear of your heart. Receive willingly and carry out effectively your loving father's advice, that by the labor of obedience you may return to him from whom you had departed by the sloth of disobedience. So we're framed there with the fall quite clearly, right? But it's the labor of obedience, which is a work, right? It's hard work as compared to the sloth of disobedience. To you, therefore, my words are now addressed, whoever you may be, who are renouncing your own will. Okay, so you're giving up your own will to do battle under the Lord Christ, the true King, and are taking up the strong, bright weapons of obedience. I love that. All the people talking about Christ is King, Christ is King. It's like, do you understand what that means?
What that means for you. That is really interesting. I've never heard that before. So yeah, his idea for the monks, if you want to get to heaven, if you want to grow in virtue, then you do the opposite of what Satan did, and you live under obedience.
Precisely.
And so that was the point of the communities. That's really interesting.
They're living under obedience. That's their primary thing. So it's yes, and therefore Milton setting up Satan in disobedience. I mean, it's the fathers have this explanation of what the fall was. It was disobedience, right? But within the monastic tradition, it's saying you renounce your own will to do battle, right? You renounce your own will so that you can fight. It's like you are being never mind Achilles, right? You're being trained as a monk. And again, what I love about this too is realizing that all of the sort of Eastern mysticism of the samurai warriors or the Buddhist monk warriors, it's like we've got our own, right? It's
yes.
The monastic warrior monk battle is real and there. It's what this is what England gave up when Henry VIII closed all the monasteries. He closed all the fighting schools. He closed all the schools for doing battle under the Lord Christ, the true King. So it's not only that he rejects the Pope, right? He rejects the kingship of Christ.
Yes. Because in his thoughts, I'm the king.
Right.
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 And I will have a male heir. That was all ego. all of it.
Yes, that is well. But so and the thing is, the battle language is all throughout this introduction. So he's saying, here's our instructions, what we need to do. So he's like, having our loins girded, therefore, with faith in the performance of good works, let us walk in his paths by the guidance of the gospel, that we may deserve to see him who has called us to his kingdom. For if we wish to dwell in the tent of that kingdom, we must run to it by good deeds, or we shall never reach it. So, brethren, we have asked the Lord who is to dwell in his tent, and we have heard his commands to anyone who would dwell there. It remains for us to fulfill those duties. The tent imagery is very important because this is actually Old Testament. This is the tabernacle. This is the tent of the tabernacle that the Israelites have in the desert. And when for my How to Be Good course, we read Numbers. You get the armies of the Israelites after they've come out of Egypt, and they're arrayed around the tabernacle, the tent in the desert, in companies, right? It's this incredibly military imagery. Never mind, your virtue and honor and proud to be warrior kind of stuff. The monastic tradition is completely infused with this military battle imagery. Therefore, we must prepare our hearts and bodies to do battle under the holy obedience of his commands. I mean, this is like you're going as a soldier into battle to train to be able to deal with the demons, right? And it's throughout the Middle Ages, particularly in the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries, the kingdoms depended on, as they understood it, they depended on them having monks saying prayers, because they're in the spiritual battle. Think about, why are we so weak right now? We don't have prayer warriors out there actually doing battle. Remember, hey, we did it, right? How did Bukele defeat MS-13?
Our Lady.
Prayer. It's prayer.
Yep, he prays. I think he prays the rosary too.
Very good. I mean, she's also Our Lady of the Battles, right? Our Lepanto and everything, right? Our Lady, it's like battle, but it's you're praying, you're part of the battle against the demons. But to do that, you have to be good soldiers, which is in obedience to Christ the King. Okay. Prepare our hearts and bodies to do battle under the holy obedience of his commands, and let us ask God that he be pleased to give us the help of his grace for anything which our nature finds hardly possible. And if we want to escape the pains of hell and attain a life everlasting, then while there is still time, right? So while we're alive now, it's like, never mind, like the game never ends, right? We're in it, right? This is the game, right?
Yeah.
Video game guys, we're in the game. While there is still time, while we are still in the body and are able to fulfill all these things by the light of this life, we must hasten to do now what will profit us for eternity. And therefore, and this is the sort of clincher at the end of the prologue, we are going to establish a school for the service of the Lord. Now, the word in Latin is schola, and this seems to mean military school, right? It's like, this isn't just a school where you learn like Latin. Well, they did, but this isn't just a reading and writing school. This is a battle training school. You're being trained in battle against the demons, and you're going to sing. It's your singing that's the real training. In founding it, we hope to introduce nothing harsh or burdensome, but if a certain strictness results from the dictates of equity for the amendment of vices or the preservation of charity, do not be at once dismayed and fly from the way of salvation, whose entrance cannot but be narrow. For as we advance in the religious life and in faith, our hearts expand and we run the way of God's commandments with unspeakable sweetness of love. Thus never departing from his school, but persevering in the monastery according to his teaching until death, we may by patience share in the sufferings of Christ and deserve to have a share also in his kingdom. So the monastic structure is to train you in this species of virtue, which is the things that are going to enable you to fight in this battle.
Yeah, you can tell how structured it is just by listening to what he wrote. Like I said, it's the rule of Saint Benedict, right? It's a bunch of rules that you follow. Obedience, it sounds like being number one.
Obedience right? is number one, and what is the thing that makes it hardest to be obedient?
Pride. Yeah, you have to get humility is the opposite of pride. It's often seen as weakness. it was seen as stupidity in Thomas Aquinas because he was very humble and quiet, and he was obviously the opposite of stupid, right? But so it's not a modern it's not simply a modern problem that we look towards. We look for men of bravado who would speak about great things that they're going to do. Trump is famous for this. He gets mocked all the time for it. It's pretty funny to watch, and I like Trump. I don't think he's a terrible person. I think he was a good president, but his attitude of like hyper confidence, I think people are attracted to that, and they like that. And the problem, if there is a problem with that, it's this: that if somebody doesn't act like that, they're mistaken for weak, and they're mistaken for less intelligent.
Well, that's in the context of the self-help structure, right? That
invented the public expressions of confidence.
Yeah. I mean, Trump fits totally with Smiles. Smiles was Scottish, so was Trump's mother, right? It's that kind of confidence and entrepreneurship, and I mean, in fact, civic mindedness, all of that fits in that model of virtue, right?
Right, and I think Trump fits all of those. I think he is very civic minded. It's people forget he didn't have to do any of this,
right?
And he did not need an ego boost. Obviously, clearly, he's very self confident. So I do think he was civic minded by running for president and doing it again. I think it's the same thing. Right. So that's very interesting.
But then people can sloppily claim he's not behaving like a Christian, but what they mean is he's not behaving like a monk, right? And it is. I do find it amusing in a lot of ways to have. It's like, well, most people aren't behaving like monks because they're not surrendering to a rule by which, I mean, so Benedict lists out, and I do have a list here, which I can show this, right? Although you might not be able to read it. He gives these 12 steps of humility, although they're not really steps as sort of parts, right? They include things like obedience to the abbot, patience, confession of one's evil thoughts and sins to the abbot, being happy with the meager property that you have, because you don't have any properties, like you surrender it all. Keeping being not talking, they kept silence, not laughing, as we know from the Name of the Rose, speaking little, keeping a humble appearance. All of these things, they're all specifically monastic virtues, because the goal is to be in perfect obedience to the abbot, who is in the place of the Father, at the Lord Christ. So as, and mainly what they spend all their time doing is in choir singing, right? They're in the battles. They're like the battle chorus of the community against Satan, and they have this ability to fight Satan because they are obedient, and he's the opposite of that.
Right. It's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive to the secular mind, I think. And I think that's a lot of what's going on today.
Well, it's counterintuitive because and this is my final picture for tonight, was the angels are climbing to heaven, right? And it insofar as we are looking to success or status in the world, say self-regard or status or civic pride feels appropriate. Whereas, but I suppose, I mean, this is a good place to sort of pull around that. Our question being, does that mean that therefore our this worldly ambition and activity is all satanic or not?
It depends on why you're doing it. It also your intentions your intentions matter. There were very wealthy, well-connected monarchs of Europe, could be saints, or they could just be complete hedonists. There's examples of both. People who used their position to help, and people who used their position to help themselves.
Wow, virtue's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, okay. So next week we'll continue with corporate virtue signaling. No, so I gave Casey homework last week to say please go find some examples of pride, and it's like I think we are now in a position, hopefully, to have enough of the layers to understand why these inversions are happening.
And it was
yeah.
It was a difficult assignment because pride is such a private vice. It's a hidden vice. You can only see it once somebody acts on it. So it was kind of hard to find images.
Well, this is good. This is good. So we now understand why we're drawn to it, and
Mm-hmm.
how it gets tangled. The equivocations of what counts as virtue are important,
Mm-hmm.
and the understanding that the default for what most people mean by Christian virtue is a monastic model, but we've lost that institutional structure for people to understand it, and so they just think, well, you're supposed to be humble. It's like, well, why, right? Um, that is
Yeah.
complicated and tricky for people.
Right.
Okay, well, humbly, we will now we either unauthorized has not been working, or Friday is not the time when people want to hang out watching a stream. Yeah, we're not getting audience tonight, so we need to, well,
Now
but I do think
we'll catch them when they come home. It's Friday night.
That's fine. That I do want to, for the next few weeks, do Friday, because it'll help me get to fencing practice on Thursdays, and then I won't be so tired for fencing practice. And I've got my competition coming up in at the beginning of July, and I need to not lose because my pride just can't take it.
She's not kidding.
I'm not. I really don't want to completely
She
lose,
really
but
likes to
it's
win.
very I'm finding, humbly enough, I don't know if this humble or horrified, I'm right at the age where things are starting to like tip, and believe me, I thought I was in decent shape. I'm clearly not, and I pulled something yesterday. So
Well, I admire you for doing that sport, because that's a tough sport. I mean, it takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of persistence at any age. So yeah, that's great.
I got touches on people last night too. They were not happy to realize I could get. So that's all right.
Underestimated you, did they?
Yeah. However, the people that I'm going to fence in July will not underestimate me whatsoever, because we're all the same age and we know what we're like, right? Which is tricky. But so realizing that this monastic training and obedience and virtue that I said last week has been behind a lot of the stuff that I went into being a fencer to learn, was specifically because the monks have all of this military imagery, and it does seem to affect the way in which they understand the shaping of their reactions, right? If you can understand, and that many of them actually came to the monastic life. I'll go back to the climbing angels. They came to the monastic life from military background because they were often of the nobility. So
that was my next question. Did they have military training?
Definitely in the 12th century with the Cistercians, because the ones that Bernard Clairvaux recruits, because he recruits all his adult brothers. Yes, the Franciscans are interesting because Francis was a merchant, and so their sort of feelings of virtue have a different social character. Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting. Yeah, because their whole thing is giving up worldly goods.
Right.
And his father was a very wealthy trader.
He was a silk merchant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a good sort of the meta lessons here. We are, when you're thinking about virtue, you also have to pay attention to the social structures that you're embedded in, because they are conditioning what counts in your society. And of course, for Christians, we're not supposed to be counting what the world considers, and therefore we're in this further complicated relationship both with our own culture and the institutional Christianity that we are part of. Gee.
Yes.
Not easy. Okay. Well, I'm glad that President Bukele is praying for help, because that's where you get it. We pray. We humble ourselves in prayer. To be continued.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Like, subscribe. Come back next week. Good night.